What if I told you 10 minutes of cardio could change your heart health more than an hour on the treadmill? What if I then followed up by saying that doesn't necessarily mean that is the best option for you? We are going to be breaking this down, so much more, in today's episode, comparing and contrasting HIIT with Zone 2 cardio. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
This should be a fun episode, doing a little more deep dive research. Zone 2 and HIIT has been a popular, I don't know if it's a trending topic, but a popular topic among our audience. So we wanted to really break this down, give some examples, set some protocols, go through the ideal protocol. So as we kind of teased on the top, one is certainly more efficient than the other, but there are some additional factors that kind of go into what your entire health and fitness regimen is going to look like. So we're going to break all that down for you. But if we want to just start very simply, what is HIIT?
Yeah, so HIIT is an acronym, well, first and foremost. That stands for high intensity interval training. So I feel like this started to get popular. Well, I'm going to sound really old right now, but maybe 15 years ago. I feel like HIIT was just starting. Unless maybe it's just I'm imagining things and that's just when we started our own fitness journeys, but I feel like right around then is when it started getting popular.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, solid. And there's been a lot of research done since then. So high intensity interval training, maybe some of you have heard of a Tabata protocol, which is 20 seconds all out, 10 seconds rest. It's 8 rounds, literally 4 minutes of work. So when Josh is talking about, HIIT can be really efficient in the way that it's done, in the way that it's programmed, we're talking about really small, short, but high effort bursts of intense exercise that are then being alternated with recovery periods. Typically that recovery period is you slowing down. Let's say you're doing bike sprints. You just, slowing down your feet. If you were doing treadmill sprints, maybe you're hopping onto the side of the treadmill for 10 seconds and that's your recovery period. So over the last few years, there's been a really big surge in research. And I was kind of inspired to talk about this today because I was recently at a conference and there is a very world-renowned HIIT researcher that was speaking to HIIT protocols and current research. And I was like, this will be great to bring to the podcast. So part of what I want to talk about today is HIIT's effects on VO2 max, which is essentially your ability to uptake oxygen during exercise. And the differences that we're seeing in health effects on a healthy population versus other populations non-athletes or versus athletes or someone in heart failure or obese populations. Because I think a lot of times we talk about these things and it's kind of well, who is that for though? And what is the practical application? And could someone who has a heart issue do HIIT or are they going to have a heart attack? So I think that will be helpful to dive into. Also, like Josh said, we'll be comparing HIIT and Zone 2. And then I also want to get into a little bit the research on exercise snacks. I know we've talked about that a little bit on the podcast before, not so much in a research deep dive setting, but more so just hey, you could do these short bouts of exercise. So being able to just kind of talk practical application there. So one thing that I do want to point out is one of the biggest things that we're looking at in HIIT research is raising maximal oxygen uptake. So that's VO2 max, which is kind of this gold standard, I would call it, of cardiorespiratory fitness. This is just such a funny side note. So the researcher who spoke on at the event that I was at Forever Strong, he's from Canada, and he kept saying cardiorespiratory fitness. And it took me a second because I say cardiorespiratory, heart and lung, right? Cardiorespiratory. But he was saying cardiorespiratory. And I was like, I wonder if that's a Canadian thing. Just a very random side note. So if you're from Canada, let us know if that's how you say it or if it was just this researcher specifically. And I was like, do I need to change the way that I say it?
Change the way I look at life.
I was like, he is saying cardiorespiratory, right? Which is cardiorespiratory.
That's all she was thinking about the entire speech.
I did every time he said
respiratory.
Every time he said it tripped me up a little. Shout out to Dr. Martin Gabala. So anyway, What we do see is that whether you are training HIIT, or sprint training, or your zone training or moderate intensity training, which is more of that zone, you are going to increase your VO2 max. Pretty much with any type of cardio that you do, you are going to increase your VO2 max, which is a good thing. The higher your VO2 max, the better. Now, what we do see is that in HIIT, when we're doing HIIT protocols compared to lower intensity continuous training, we do see some small to moderate gains. Like there definitely is a slight edge for HIIT training when we're kind of comparing apples to apples. But a lot of times what the big difference is there is that we're seeing very similar effects of zone 2 versus HIIT. And we'll get a little more into the weeds with this in a moment, but we're seeing very similar effects, but with the HIIT protocol being done in way less time. So if you think about, someone is getting the same, like sometimes you'll see in research, like, you get the same benefits from HIIT as you do for zone 2. Well, yes, that's true, except you're getting the benefit in maybe 8 minutes from HIIT that might have taken you 30 minutes on a treadmill, of zone 2 rather. So that's kind of an important distinction that I think is helpful to bring to the table, that the effects might be similar, but you're able to make those same effects in less time with HIIT.
Now, question for you, Joelle. Did the keynote speaker happen to discuss which protocol? Because I have a few brought up here, and I know the most studied tends to be that 4x4 Norwegian HIIT. Was he doing like a 10x1 in regards to the intervals, the sprint intervals? Did he discuss a specific protocol for the majority of the research, or was it referred to as HIIT in general?
Good question. So 4x4 is very common. Another very common one would be Tabata, which, like I said, is kind of that 20 seconds on, 1 second off, 8 rounds, ends up being about 4 minutes of work. Sprint interval training is typically like a 30-second all-out sprint with a longer rest. He did not speak to very specific protocols except for what was in a specific study. So if he was citing a specific research paper that looked at, 3 20-second bouts of sprints, that's what he was talking about. He did not specify like the best HIIT protocol, because I think there's so much variation in what is effective. But he was just so adamant about the fact that it's not about the duration of the cardio that you're doing. It's about the intensity that you can bring to that cardio. So HIIT is obviously going to be higher impact, but more time efficient. Zone 2 is going to be more sustainable. You're doing it for a longer period of time, but you could never sustain the heart rate levels that you're getting to in HIIT. You could never sustain that with a lower obviously with a lower intensity, but with a longer duration of training. So, zone 2, you might be working at like 60 to 70% of your heart rate max, which is like 45 to 65% of your VO2 max. Whereas with HIIT, those high intensity bursts that you're training at are like 80 to 90% of your heart rate max or VO2 max. So you have those really, really, really high effort, intense bursts, and then those low intensity periods that are usually, I would say, like 10 to 30 seconds, depending again on how long that original intensity bout is.
So I'm glad you brought that up, and this is something I just want to outline in general protocol. So there are many different ways to do this, as you can already kind of tell. It could be sprints, it could be literally metcons, it could be this 4x4 protocol, it could be swimming. The main element of HIIT is going to be this shorter burst, that 80 to 95%. Ideally, at the higher end, we're going basically all max out effort, with a period of recovery following. Now, it can be something as minimal as Tabata, where you're literally talking 10 seconds between rounds, but you're done in those 8 rounds. You're 4 minutes and you're out. It could be upwards of a 3-minute active recovery if you're doing something like the 4x4 protocol, where it's a 4 minute at and they even say 90 to 95% at 4 minutes, which I think is crazy. I certainly could not do that at this point in time. But then you're followed by a 3-minute active recovery. The sprint intervals could be a 30-second all-out sprint, and then 4 minutes of like a light walking back to your start position. So many different ways to go throughout this, and you're going to find out very quickly based on where you're at in the journey of integrating these HIIT sessions what may be the most appropriate. So it might not take a whole lot to get you into that 90 to 95% range. You're also not going to be able to maintain that for very long. So your recovery rate is going to take a bit longer. And those are all data points that you can kind of track and go throughout this process to see, okay, I'm now able to sustain this longer. I'm now able to get back to my resting heart rate quicker. Yeah, so just as far as general protocols, it's a quick burst, bringing it back down with a recovery period.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I think there is a lot of, I guess, content and just things out there that say, like, do this HIIT workout with me. And it's not true HIIT. It's not actually HIIT. It's just like a circuit style of a workout. So I think this is a great episode to share with your friends, and just for those listening to kind of clarify, like, what HIIT actually is, because that word gets thrown around so much on social media that it can be kind of confusing as far as like, oh, I'm doing this HIIT circuit, but if you're not at those max or close to max intensities of heart rate, it's not HIIT.
Yeah, I mean, in general, like the max that you would ever see a true HIIT workout is like maybe 30 minutes, but that's including a warm up, including a cool down. There are probably longer rest periods in there. If you hop onto Instagram and you see like, do this 45-minute HIIT leg workout with me, that is not HIIT. That doesn't mean that person isn't working intensely, but that's not a true HIIT protocol. You're not doing HIIT for an hour, or even 45 minutes. You're generally looking at, anywhere from literally 1 minute to 10 minutes, like of total actual high intensity work. And that's what's really cool. And I think what's helpful to also talk about is like lowering the barrier to entry, and something I really liked about how this presenter researched. I'm sure there's like a little bit of bias towards zone 2, towards HIIT, because he is like a HIIT researcher. But something that I really liked about how he presented was specifically about how HIIT can really lower the barrier to entry, because you could say to someone, hey, instead of worrying about 45 minutes of walking or running or whatever on a treadmill, in that low intensity state, what about if I told you only have to do 4 minutes of work, and it's going to be really high intensity, but you're done in 4 minutes. So I think from a time perspective, that's helpful to hear, because the most commonly cited reason that people don't exercise is they say time is a barrier. And so if we told you, well, you actually only have to do this for 4 minutes or 2 minutes, is time still your barrier then? And that might alleviate that barrier for you of like, well, yeah, I don't have time for that either. Okay, so well then time is not the barrier. So I think that's, a helpful part of the conversation. I was looking at some of the research this morning as I was kind of prepping this podcast, and I wanted to look at not just healthy populations in HIIT, but also like cardiometabolic conditions like obesity or metabolic syndrome or cardiovascular disease. And it continues to prove effective across those populations as well. And again, is super time efficient. So both from a improving fitness standpoint, but also health markers. And there have been some meta-analyses on like HIIT's efficacy in these types of groups. And something that I was particularly curious about was like patients with heart failure. Because when I did my master's in exercise physiology, we used to work like a cardiac rehab program, basically. It was called the Adult Fitness Program, but they were cardiac rehab patients. And we were exercising with them for an hour, taking them through cardio routines, taking them through strength training routines, checking their blood pressure while they're exercising, making sure their blood pressure was in a great place. And I think people hear of heart issues and they're afraid to exercise. And I want to kind of like, I want to shed some light on that. So for instance, in this particular study, this was from 2023, patients with heart failure who had that reduced ejection fraction found that HIIT led to significantly greater improvements in peak VO2 compared to moderate intensity training. These heart failure patients had gains in cardiac function, boost in their left ventricular ejection fraction, which is super helpful. And even increasing like the distance that they could go, how long they could perform. They enhanced their exercise capacity, their functional mobility, and overall VO2. And they ran similar studies on like patients with coronary artery disease, again, showing really, really similar trends that VO2 max was like, or training HIIT for VO2 max was actually a really effective therapy. Like they're using HIIT in cardiac rehab patients as therapy to improve their heart health. So I think that's helpful for people to hear. People who struggle with high blood pressure, poor lipid profile, so cholesterol, insulin resistance, HIIT has been shown to effectively reduce those risk factors. And again, it's not that you wouldn't see those same effects in something like Zone 2. It's that you're able to achieve those same effects, or sometimes with a slightly better effects, but in less time, which is even more important. Same thing with overweight and obese populations as well. HIIT and continuous training are going to produce similar effects, but again, in less time.
So I know that was a ton, and I want to just recap a couple of the main highlights here. So benefits to HIIT, VO2 max improvement. It's been shown to significantly increase VO2 max, which is a key indicator of cardiovascular fitness, cardiovascular health overall. So we're talking about enhancing endothelial function, arterial elasticity, reducing blood pressure. As far as metabolic effects, improving insulin sensitivity, glucose regulation, beneficial for individuals at risk or currently struggling with type 2 diabetes. And then body composition, so effective in reducing body fat, particularly visceral fats, while preserving lean mass. And again, as far as time, you're doing this in a fraction of the amount of time that it takes to incorporate Zone 2 cardio. And we'll talk about why don't we just do this? If it's 4 minutes a day, why aren't we just doing this? We'll dive into that in a little bit. As far as general recommendations, though, so again, we'll highlight it and we'll circle back. Typically, again, this is not an everyday occurrence. You can get great benefits from a couple days a week, starting at 10 to 20 minutes per session, and it may not ever, grow much beyond that, especially the 20-minute threshold, because it's a very concise, a very high effort, short burst period. And even within that time, if you want to talk about a little more specific, just referencing PubMed, within 6 weeks of utilizing HIIT training, 5.5 to 7.2% VO2 max increases, which is not insignificant.
Yeah. That makes me want to jump to exercise snacks for a minute, because I think people might not fully grasp how little duration we're talking about when we talk about HIIT training. And so exercise snacks has been this kind of like new trendy thing going around. And it makes sense that it's kind of like garnering attention because it's really, really brief. It's a vigorous bout of exercise. Again, I'm talking like 20 to 60 seconds. And typically we're seeing these performed throughout the day. So I think the one that Martin was leading a study on, or Dr. Gabala was leading a study on, was 3 20-second bouts 3 times a day. So 3 20-second bouts 3 times a day. So you're talking about 1 minute of work 3 times a day. So 3 minutes total. 3 minutes total in a day of intense exercise. And the idea there is really to accumulate these short spikes of high intensity activity as a time efficient way to improve fitness, especially for people that might not have those continuous blocks of time to dedicate to a workout. I think of office workers all the time who are like, I sit at a desk, for 8 to 10 hours a day. And, maybe they're getting in a workout before work or after work, or maybe they're not. Maybe they don't feel like they have time to, or whatever else. Well, if you have stairs in your building, could you, on your lunch break, go literally sprint up your office stairs, 20 seconds of running up those stairs? Like that's what we're talking about here. And you do that 3 times across your 8-hour workday. Great. Fantastic. That alone is having those 3 minutes is having significant improvements in VO2 max and cardiorespiratory and cardiorespiratory health. So I just, for me, I think that's so cool because we talk about all the time, us three on this podcast and with our clients, lowering the barrier to entry. How do we get more people moving? And you might be hearing all this and you're like, yeah, but like intense work, like I'd rather do the slow 45 minutes. That's fine. Like if you would prefer still to do the moderate intensity, cardio for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever that is, because the lower intensity feels like a lower barrier to entry for you. I can get that. Like we
or
are
it just
team
gets you the
something.
hell out of the house.
Yeah, like we are team something is better than nothing always. But for the person who's like, I don't care how intense I have to work, if I could be done in 4 minutes and get incredible benefits, then like this is the research for you.
Hey guys, real quick. If you've been listening and thinking, I need to start doing something for my health, but I don't have time for a full program, that is literally why we built the SDE Method app. It's a fitness app made for real people with real lives. Busy parents, working professionals, anyone juggling 100 things. You can get a smart, effective workout in around 30 minutes, some even closer to 20 minutes, and log out knowing you made progress. You can finally take the guessing out of your workouts. We have workouts designed to be done at the gym or at home, and you get access to all of them when you sign up. As life phases change, you can pick a new one that aligns better with what you have going on right now. And one more thing, we are also qualified for HSA FSA reimbursement. So just hit the app link in the show notes, start where you are, we'll help with the rest. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah. And I'd say if you're somebody who's already doing all the things, like let's say you have a solid strength program that you're consistent with, you're doing regular cardio, you can do both. Like if you enjoy the zone 2 work and you want to do a couple days of that and throw in a day of more of the high intensity stuff, sprints or whatever it is, that there's beauty in that too. So, just have fun with it and try something new. It could end up being your preferred style if it's not something that you're used to doing right now.
And this was something like just this morning, I snuck in 4 30-second sprints. I was like, I've done this a few times. It's 7 to 10 minutes. I've been the one to jump up and do my 2 miles and then start my day that route. But like, if I'm behind a little bit, which was the case today, like, well, shit, I'll just go out there.
I walk out to the gym. The garage doors are open now that it's nice out, or warmer, I should say. It wasn't nice. It was pouring. It's literally pouring. And I look in I'm like, where is he? Like, he wasn't in the house. He's not out here, but the doors are open. You just see Josh sprinting top speed down our road. It's 5:45 in the morning. Our neighbors probably think we're insane between me blasting music and lifting and him sprinting. But like, you got to do what you got to do. And he was in and out within minutes.
That's what she said.
Seconds. No, then she would have said seconds, John.
Heyo.
Heyo.
I hope everyone's laughing along with us.
You're laughing with us. We're about to get our second 1-star review. I want to come back to the study. I think that you were talking about, Josh, about they were looking at like a 6-week bout of, I think it was exercise snacks that you were talking about. But they basically wanted to test, this was a study from Jenkins in 2019. They wanted to test if climbing a few flights of stairs a few times a day could improve fitness. And so they took sedentary, so inactive young adults, and they did these quote snacks of stair climbing that were 3 bouts per day, about 60 steps, which was about 20 seconds worth. And they repeated it 3 days a week for 6 weeks. So not even every day. This was 3 times a week for 6 weeks. And despite that burst being literally 20 seconds long, with hours of recovery between the snacks, that stimulus was still enough to produce measurable improvements in VO2 max. And so their VO2 max in that sedentary group increased about 5% over 6 weeks, which doesn't sound like a lot. But that is significantly higher than the control group, who was the non-exercising group. And while 5%, again, like sounds kind of modest, think about the fact that that was with literally 1 minute of intense effort per day, because it was 3 20-second bouts, 3 days a week. So 3 minutes of exercise in a whole week. 3 minutes.
That's wild.
In an entire week. Raised VO2 max 5%. So think about if you're doing more than that, you are seeing more benefit. So that was kind of, I think, what started, from what I could see, a lot of the exercise snack research, because it really opened things up for like follow-up experiments to sort of reinforce the findings. Like, okay, what if people do cycle sprints and they're doing them on the bike instead of running upstairs? And so then, bike snacks, exercise snacks started being studied, and they were seeing big differences in blood sugar control, and diabetics needing to use less insulin because they're doing those exercise snacks. And I know we've talked about that before with movement and squats being really effective for like blood sugar control. So I just think I like nerd out on this research because I think it's so cool to see the metabolic impact of literally a 30-second bout of exercise. And then that's having effects on like your blood sugar, your insulin, your cholesterol, your blood pressure. Like, we can't lower the barrier to entry any more than telling you to exercise 1 minute per day, 3 days a week. Like, I can't make the barrier any lower. If that still sounds too challenging, then time is not the barrier.
You could literally be in your living room throwing shadow punches, doing a little shadow boxing for a minute, all out, and be done in a minute, and like you're done for the day for this kind of protocol.
Yeah, there really is, at this point, there's nothing that says like, oh, it has to be stairs. I'm glad you mentioned the shadow boxing, because it doesn't have to be stairs. It doesn't have to be a treadmill. It doesn't have to be you running sprints outside. The goal is move vigorously for 20 seconds and do that a few times per day and a few times per week. And you will see better insulin responses, better blood sugar control, blood lipids staying in better ranges for overweight individuals, better glycemic control, better metabolic health. Like, so cool. To me, that is so freaking cool.
When you could talk about longevity, like this was an Instagram stat. This is not a scientific back stat, so I don't know if there's any truth to this at all. But someone threw out a percentage. It was 99% of adults after age 30 will never sprint again or something like that.
I don't know if there's
I've
truth
seen
to that. I think it
But
is
it is
a
so
myth,
it is a
but
significant number.
Yes. And, I talk about this often on Instagram lately in my morning little post where I'm training, like, if you're not jumping, you're aging. And a lot of people are taking that literally, like, I don't like jumping. What if I don't want to jump? It's not just jumping. It can be sprinting. It can be bounding. It can be any sort of explosive work. So I wanted to hit on that. But also, I think the question that's going to come up is, how do I track this? How do I make sure I'm doing this accurately? And a lot of you wear some sort of wearable, right? Whether it's a Garmin or an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring. So you can track your heart rate through those things. It's not going to be as accurate as wearing a heart rate strap around your chest. So if you really want like the most accurate way to track your heart rate while doing this, grab a chest strap. That most of them link with all of these wearables. That's going to be number one, because I find that, and I think, I don't have the research in front of me, but I think it was a lot of these wearables are going to overestimate what your heart rate actually is. So it's going to tell you it's higher than it actually is, which if you're doing zone 2, that's like a good thing, I guess, because you want your heart rate to be on the lower end to stay in zone 2. But if you're trying to do HIIT and it's telling you you're reaching these near maximal heart rates when you're actually not, then you're not really there. So how do we figure out that we're at the right intensity, even if you don't have a wearable? Number one could be the talk test. So for something like zone 2, you want to be able to hold a conversation without gasping for air. And that kind of tells you that you're in that optimal zone. Whereas for something like HIIT, you should only be able to get out a word or two without feeling like you need to take a breath and you're almost gasping, compared to something like zone 2. RPE, we talk about this all the time for strength work, but it goes for cardio work too. So you want to be closer to an RPE of a 9 or even closer to a 10 for those intervals. So you want to feel like you're at 9 or 10 out of 10. And then just pay attention to your breathing and recovery during the recovery periods. It should take you that full rest period or recovery period to kind of catch your breath or have it come down a little bit so that you can go again for the next interval. But if you don't have a wearable, kind of tune into those things. And it is a skill that you're going to kind of need to practice, but you do get to a point where you know how hard you're pushing your body after some practice.
It's when it comes to HIIT, it's max effort. It's if you are not going to invest in a wearable or anything like that, you are just, whatever the active time is, you are giving all of your effort to that thing. And it might not look that fast. It might not seem like you're doing that much, but if you are doing it to the best of your ability, pushing yourself and being honest with yourself, you're there. So then just focus on how long you're at that period of effort and how long you're in that recover period. I do want to transition in a second and then come back to a compare and contrast. But one last point I want to drive home, what I was kind of getting to before. If we are not pushing ourselves, as we age, they talk about these curves. I think it's 40 or age 40 or 35, and then like 60 or 64, something like that, where we see the most steep crash in our overall health. And again, that's just a very general statement and very general statistic, but something along those lines. Those are typically very lifestyle transition heavy periods where we're having kids or X, Y, and Z with career and all these things that slow us down, higher levels of stress, less sleep, less activity, general movement, less training specific to fitness. If we can control those things, we aren't, and we've seen this because those who are taking this to an extreme have the data on it. If we can control those factors to the best of our ability and stay aware and keep certain protocols in place, a la the L5 method, just being aware of one thing in each bucket and keeping that protocol there for life, even if that protocol changes, we can continue to age well. We can not only increase our lifespan, but increase our health span, which is the healthy years within our lives. So getting old and life sucking at 67, that's not inevitable. You can push that can down the road. Why do some people age better than others? Well, maybe they just naturally have a lower stress lifestyle and they're just naturally inclined to make better decisions. For some, it's going to feel like more work. It's okay either way. We just have to shape, and this sounds extreme, but it really shouldn't be. We have to shape our lives around creating healthy factors all around us, left, right, and center. Control what you can control at all times. Don't accept that this is the way that it has to be. Don't accept that things are inevitable. Even if it's not ideal, even if things are still going to be really, really hard and really, really just shitty, for lack of a better term, in this phase, bring it up 10%. What can you control to elevate that 10%? So we're never just throwing in the bag, because when you do that, it is so much harder to pick it up, even when life does get easier, because you get stuck in a new habitual cycle. You have a new set of habits, a new mindset, the way that you look at certain things. If you are not actively improving, this is something I've talked about for a while. If you're not actively improving, you are very likely declining significantly. Maintaining is an extremely hard thing to do, unless you are actively maintaining, like a maintenance phase, if we're talking about calories. But if you are not actively focused on improving something,
you're declining.
You are getting worse.
Yeah.
So if there's anything else you guys want to throw into HIIT, take a few minutes here. Otherwise, if we can do a general overview on the zone 2, and we'll dive into a compare and contrast between the two.
I just wanted to come back to something Alessandra talked about for a minute. Well, both of you talked about, but if you're not wearing a device that's measuring your heart rate, I don't wear personally an Apple Watch anymore. I do have an Oura Ring, but that doesn't really track your heart rate. You can log your heart rate on Oura. I'll record my heart rate while I am on a Peloton ride, for instance, but it's not live. You basically hit a button that says record indoor cycling workout. And after my workout, I could see where my heart rates were, but it's not something I'm checking live. And so I just wanted to come back and say, I wouldn't get too caught up on HIIT specifically. I wouldn't get too caught up in trying to, get your heart rate at exactly the right percentage zone that it's supposed to be in. It is a max effort burst. That is all you need to know. It is max effort, super high intensity, as hard as you possibly can. And then you have a few seconds of recovery, and then you are right back at it. You should not be able to talk. Yeah. This is 10 out of 10 max effort. So I'm kind of screw you will not even have time. You should be working so hard that you cannot even look down at your watch to see where you are. That's how you won't need to question. I wonder if I'm in the right zone. You will be breathless. Your lungs will be on fire. It will be very uncomfortable. but then you do that like 3 times and you're done.
The only word that you should be able to say while you're at that max effort is a swear word. One swear word, because it sucks so bad.
Yes, just expletives. Yes. So let's come back to zone 2 for a minute. Which I definitely don't want to shit on by any means, to be very clear. I do love HIIT, and I think that there is room for both, and both should be utilized in someone's exercise routine. Like I said before, we're going to see benefits of exercise, no matter what, no matter how long, no matter what type, if it's zone 2, if it's sprint training, if it's interval training. When we talk about zone 2, we're talking about that more like sustained aerobic exercise, usually like 60 to 70% of max effort, or some sort of pace that you could do for a relatively long duration. Obviously, we know the contrast of that is HIIT, which is those really, really short max effort bursts. Both are going to have very similar improvements in health and fitness. Both are going to have very, very similar outcomes, with each having like modest advantages in certain areas. So typically with a lot of this, we see like a slight edge in HIIT. But there are a lot of ways, prime example, what I talked about before of like lowering the barrier to entry. For some people, that low intensity movement lowers the barrier for them. Okay, it doesn't have to be this crazy high intensity thing. I could just go on a 30-minute like walk and get myself in zone 2, or like a 30-minute jog, or whatever that, activity is for you, and get myself into zone 2. And that is going to have positive effects on your aerobic capacity and on your VO2 max, whether you are an athlete, whether you are not an athlete. Again, the biggest difference that we're looking at is the time efficiency piece of HIIT. But we're still going to see metabolic health improvements, endurance adaptations, metabolic improvements in that same zone 2 training. So you might not be surprised to hear us say, do what you like best, do a combo of the two if you can. But like, if we're really talking practical application, I think incorporating a mix throughout your week is really helpful, because there might be some kind of like synergistic benefits of having both. And as a coach, if you're listening to this, you have to consider a client's preferences and their schedule and possibly any medical considerations. Some people may really enjoy the like challenge of HIIT, and other people might really prefer the like more consistent low intensity of a zone 2 jog. And so my biggest question to you as someone listening to this is, what are you going to be able to adhere to the most? Because that's always going to be your biggest determinant of success. Is the, 45-minute or hour-long zone 2 jog, is that going to be the thing that you can adhere to? Or is like, a 10-minute workout where 5 minutes of that is all out max effort, is that going to be the biggest thing that you can adhere to? And again, you can have a mix of both, and I think it's beneficial to have a mix of both. But always, for me, the biggest difference is going to be, what do you like? What can you incorporate the most of? Because that's where you're going to find the most success.
Joelle, one more question before we move on from HIIT, because I think this is one that comes up often, is that women should not do HIIT because it spikes their cortisol levels, or it makes them too stressed and it makes them puffy and all these things that you see floating around. So you want to just touch on that really quick? Because I think that's another trendy part of this conversation, that women are scared to do HIIT because it's going to mess up their hormones.
Yeah. The deep sigh. Yeah. So where do I start here? A few things. One, find me someone who is obese from doing HIIT training. Let's just start there. Find me someone who got overweight or obese from doing sprints. I'll wait. You're not going to find it, number one. Number two, we have seen over and over and over and over again in research that if anything, exercise, cardiovascular exercise, aerobic exercise, anaerobic exercise is helpful for hormonal health. Is it true that when someone exercises or puts stress on the body, there's an increase in cortisol? Yes. That is intentional. That is supposed to happen. If you did not have that happen, it would be an issue. What we are talking about with spikes in cortisol when it comes to exercise is an acute bout. We need cortisol. We would be in a diseased state without cortisol. What we do and don't, what we have to kind of differentiate between is that acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is a very short bout of an increase, in this sense, in cortisol. Then we recover and things stabilize. We have homeostasis happening and things kind of come down and stabilize. You could kind of think about, when I think about acute and chronic, the term inflammation comes up a lot. And I think that kind of gets like lumped in with this conversation of cortisol. So I want to bring that up for a minute because again, acute inflammation versus chronic inflammation. If I trip and break my ankle, I'm going to have an acute bout of inflammation. My ankle is going to swell up. It's going to get red. That swelling is bringing blood and nutrients to the injury site to help start the repair, recovery, healing process. There's an increase in cortisol, but we need that to help start the repair and recovery process. If we had chronic inflammation or chronic stress or dysregulated cortisol levels at the times where cortisol isn't supposed to be peaking and dropping, that's a different story. But when we talk about exercise increasing cortisol, yes, but that is an acute bout of a hormone increasing that will then stabilize and come down, provided that we are recovering well. The other reason that I think this kind of HIIT topic gets lumped into like hormones and whatever is because there is a population of people, albeit a small population of people, who are exercising, quote, too much relative to their recovery capacity and what they are consuming. And so this is like kind of a whole separate thing of like overtraining versus under recovering. I am like team is not really overtraining. It's very, 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 very hard to actually overtrain. What's really happening is under recovery. So not enough rest, not enough recovery, not enough fuel. There is absolutely a subset of people who are so fatigued and so under recovered and so under fueled that HIIT might not be benefiting them. That is true. The vast majority of people are not falling into that subset of people.
To play semi-devil's advocate, it's really not even devil's advocate. It's kind of along those lines. Even if it's not necessarily like the under-fueling aspect of it, there are people who live insanely stressed out lives. So like they'll go train 90 minutes, 2 hours a day because that's their outlet. And then they go to work for the next 12 hours and it's like go, 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 go all the time. And then they'll crash for 5 or 6 hours and then start over. So maybe they're eating enough, maybe they're not. There is an aspect of living within your sympathetic nervous system that is creating this chronic stress. So it doesn't even just need to be, I'm not eating enough. I don't know, that's not what you said. I'm just throwing this out there in a different, slightly different angle. If that is you have to focus on all those stress management pieces. And you, again, controlling what you can control. Maybe you have to be at work 12 to 15 hours a day right now because there's this crazy project going on and like you're living at the office and people are calling you all throughout the day and night and there's only so much you can do there. Can we focus on mindful breathing? Can we get 2 or 3 of those sessions in throughout the day? Can we do a gratitude journal? Because I know things are hard right now, but can we bring back to light the things that we do have? We have the job. We're able to pay the bills. We're able to do certain things. And in the long run, this is going to do so much for us. We have a roof over our heads. We got water. We got food. So just reframing in those simple practices, not even necessarily overhauling your entire recovery process, because it may not be everything. But if we can just implement something that gets us back into that parasympathetic state after the workout. Something as simple as 4 rounds of box breathing, which I'm now including, will be including, as you guys will see in the app.
And I think that's what's frustrating about, like, Alessandra, how you brought it's not frustrating that you brought it up. Frustrating the topic that you brought up of just, HIIT and cortisol and people being afraid to do that. I am so tired of seeing posts that scare people out of exercise.
Yeah.
How fucking bananas is that we are scaring people, particularly women, might I add, because men are not afraid to exercise for their cortisol levels. This is just a female thing. Mm-hmm. How dumb that we have a massively inactive population that we are fear-mongering exercise out of because of their cortisol levels. And Josh, I'm glad that you brought up, like, maybe you live a really stressful life, but then HIIT training is what becomes the scapegoat. You can't do 5 minutes of intervals because that's bad for your cortisol, but the 12 hours of you running on empty has nothing to do with it. Let's blame the 5 minutes of intervals. We're missing the forest for the trees. So I think a lot of times you're right. People live really high stress lives and they don't have great coping skills to recover from that stress or do their box breathing or do their journaling or their meditation. And then they see something like, if you're stressed, don't do HIIT. And it's like, so we're going to tell that person not to exercise or not to do HIIT, which is going to actually be beneficial for their blood sugar, their hormones, and all the stress happening in their life. The HIIT is not going to be what does you over, especially if we're talking about 30 seconds, a minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of HIIT training. That is not going to be the thing that does you in or ruins your hormones.
Agreed.
Preach.
So I want to circle back. I know we tiptoed into zone 2, but I want to do a general highlight reel of benefits there and then go into a compare and contrast and why we're not doing HIIT every day and when it's appropriate to sprinkle them in and what that all looks like. But quick highlight reel back on zone 2. So benefits, aerobic base building. Typically, again, we're at that 60 to 70% of maximum heart rate. So it is more optimal for enhancing mitochondrial density, improving fat oxidation, both critical for endurance performance. Cardiovascular health, strengthens the heart muscle, increases stroke volume, improves overall cardiovascular efficiency. When it comes to recovery and sustainability, it is lower intensity, so it's significantly less taxing on the body, which does allow for more frequent sessions, optimizes recovery a bit better, and it makes it a bit more sustainable over the longer term. There's also a mental clarity and stress reduction aspect to this. So when we're engaging in zone 2 cardio, and people talk about this, whether they're entering flow state or it's just, that's my time, it does have meditative effects. It can reduce stress, improve mental clarity. I dislike peeling myself out of bed at 4:45 in the morning to even do a couple miles. But when I'm done with that, I am so happy that I did, because, like, for me specifically, the stress, the mental clarity, like, I'm on a different level. When I'm doing that, I can start my day running. It's just a much more focused aspect. I don't necessarily get that with the shorter term HIIT. Like, I'm kind of bringing myself back down afterwards. But for those who maybe they are running in red, totally overvamped, this might be something. We just jog a mile, low pace as we're starting out, easing into it, rebalancing, reconfiguring. So there are pros and cons to each, which is what we're going to transition into next.
Endorphins make you happy, and happy people just don't kill their husbands. Remember the last time I said that on here? And so I said that on here, and somebody from another country who clearly has never seen Legally Blonde was very offended that I talked about killing my husband on the podcast. Do you remember that?
Right,
we got a review, I think, and that was like our other bad review.
These weirdos leaving the negative reviews are like the one-time listener who heard the one sentence and didn't understand.
She was like,
it.
I can't keep listening to this because Alessandra talked about killing her husband, even as a joke. I just find that very disturbing. I'm like, it was a freaking Legally Blonde movie.
It's a Legally Blonde reference. Oh God.
Sorry. Anyway.
Listen, if you're tired of the all or nothing cycles, the diet starts Monday, the I know what to do, I'm just not doing it feeling, we should probably talk. Our one-on-one online coaching isn't just about workouts and meal plans. It's about building something that actually fits your life. No cookie cutter templates, no guilt, just real coaching and real results. Plus, we've got a pretty big team, so we can even pair you with an expert who actually understands your lifestyle because they've gone through it too. If that sounds like what you've been missing, check out the link in the show notes to apply for coaching. Then we'll send you the link to book a free, no obligation consult call with our team. There are no hard closes. We won't even take your credit card over the phone. You'll get the details to sign up on your own time. And more good news, we are in fact qualified for HSA FSA reimbursement. One last thing, we even offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose. What are you waiting for? Spots are limited, so apply today. All right, let's get back to the show. Anyway.
So as Josh alluded to, preference is a huge piece here, and recoverability might be a huge piece as well. I think with HIIT, you are going to see a higher recovery need compared to something like a zone 2. But by the same token, you're working at such a lower duration. I would say that the recovery capacity, like apples to apples, isn't all that different. 20 minutes of HIIT versus 20 minutes of zone 2. Yes, zone 2, way better, easier recovery. But if we're talking 5 minutes of HIIT versus 20 minutes of zone 2, might be very similar recovery.
I think something we haven't brought up yet, because we're kind of approaching this from like a general population standpoint, is what are your goals? A lot of people are into running races right now, and if you have a long distance race on the calendar, most of your workouts should be the zone 2 workouts, just to build that aerobic capacity. That doesn't mean sprinkling in one maybe per week can't help, depending on what you're training for, depending on how far out your race is. If you're doing something like a 5K, the shorter durations HIIT work might actually benefit you along with some more of the longer distance, but you're not going as long as something like a half marathon or a marathon. So if you're doing a longer duration endurance event, you want to mostly train the longer duration endurance style training to prep for that. So I just wanted to throw that in there too, because I know running is still having its moment right now. But if you're just the average person trying to implement this, everything else we said still stands.
And to give you guys a quick little apples to apples comparative overview. So we'll go HIIT versus zone 2 in a couple different categories. So in regards to intensity, just that overview again, HIIT is going to be 85 to 95% of your max heart rate, whereas zone 2 is that 60 to 70%. Duration for HIIT is significantly shorter, typically in that 10, even as low as 4 to 5, upwards of 20, maybe 30 minutes occasionally, but typically call it 4 to 15 minutes, whereas zone 2 could be all over the map. It could be 20, 30, 45, 90 minutes long, depending on what you're doing, what you're training for. Primary benefit in HIIT, it's going to significantly improve VO2 max, insulin sensitivity, body composition. When it comes to zone 2, you're enhancing aerobic capacity, fat metabolism, and endurance. Recovery time, again, apples to apples, will be longer with HIIT. There's more CNS fatigue that's involved there, but if you're going with those shorter bursts, that's typically going to alleviate that. And then zone 2, shorter recovery, suitable for daily training. Injury risk with HIIT, typically higher impact, but there are certainly ways around that, especially if you're doing something like a bike. So it could potentially be a higher injury risk, but there are certainly ways around that, whereas zone 2 would be a bit lower impact. Again, suitable for most fitness levels. As far as the best for quote unquote HIIT, time-constrained individuals seeking quick fitness gains, it's going to be your most efficient option. Zone 2, individuals aiming for endurance, fat loss, sustainable training, just the more low and slow approach, but something that you could do on a regular basis if you have the time, and then without quote unquote certain aspects that you may want to mitigate. But again, there are ways around that as far as specific HIIT protocols anyway. So there is your quick comparative overview. Now, we did say HIIT will absolutely be more efficient, but it may not be the best. And I think if you guys disagree, let me know. But a hybrid of both, whether it's 2 HIIT, 1 zone 2, if we're talking about 3 days, 1 zone 2, 2 zone 2 and 1 HIIT throughout the week, like, is there a preferred ideal scenario for either of you?
Personally, you mean? Or
do both. You could do personally for yourself or a general recommendation.
I honestly really think it just comes down to preference and how you recover. Like, if you're able to recover from 2 HIIT sessions, go have at it. I would start with 1 just to ease in, especially if you're not used to doing anything like this. Like, don't start tomorrow and say, all right, I'm going to do 5 HIIT sessions this week because Josh and Alessandra said it was good for me. Like, start with one and kind of just assess from there and see how it goes. But personally, like, it just depends where my goals are. After talking about this today, I definitely want to add in at least 1 per week right now at this point postpartum. I've worked on the cardio capacity. I built my endurance up a little bit. I don't have any races on the calendar. I'm just kind of doing it for fun. So I'll stick with my zone 2 on the other days and do 1 HIIT, but that's just where I'm at this moment in time.
There was something that I read about this. I can't find the like piece of info in front of me right now, but I was reading about this before, and it was talking about how like endurance athletes who are already very much at their like, you know, very close to like their peak of like how high their VO2 max could be. Like, you know, think of like elite runners, you know, the people running marathons in like under 2 hours, you know, like elite runners who are, you know, their zone 2 is just so much different than what the average person's zone 2 looks like, for instance. But it was talking about how for that person who's kind of like very, very steady and capable already in their endurance, that adding in some of those HIIT sessions can help give that extra stimulus for improved cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory health and fitness that they might not be getting much of anymore, because the stimulus for an elite athlete to be doing zone 2, like the stimulus is so much different than having those heavy bouts. So I actually think that obviously the majority of your training, if you're like training for a marathon or an ultra, the majority of your training should not be like HIIT training. You're going to need to do a lot of distance work and zone 2 work. But to have that additional extra stimulus here and there of those high, heavy exercise bouts, it seems to really benefit cardiorespiratory health, which in the long term should improve your distance and endurance health for the zone 2 stuff.
Yeah. Even in the off season, like if you're not training for a race and in season, quote unquote, right now, like definitely start to experiment with stuff like that, because it can only help.
Yeah. My own personal preference is the HIIT route, even like with the Peloton bike. Like, I don't think I've ever done like just a 45-minute like moderate ride on the Peloton. Every time I get on, I'm doing a 15, 20 or 30-minute like interval or hills or speed, you know, speed and hills race or whatever it is. I'm always doing some sort of interval thing. And it didn't start out in the way that I was like looking for HIIT. It just, that's more interesting to me. And like, I gravitate more towards that than just like pedaling my feet for 45 minutes. I would be bored out of my mind.
Yeah, you got to find a good podcast or video if you're doing that.
Yeah. So like, I like the HIIT, and I like someone yelling in my face, yelling at me to go faster. She's like, "You're going to get breathless on this one." I'm like, bitch, I've been breathless since the warm up. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, I like a good hybrid. So I've been leaning more towards zone 2, getting a few of those sessions in and just trying to be able to like not be shot after 2 or 3 miles. Like that was my initial goal. And now that we've got a decent base, ideally I'll be getting 1 and 2 HIIT sessions in, and then 2 to 3 longer zone 2 runs throughout the week. I'm always a big advocate of just being well-rounded. Unless you're training for a specific event or you're an athlete in a specific sport, like having the ability to do a little bit of everything well is always something I like to approach it as. So whether that's 1 HIIT, 2 zone 2s, or 2 HIITs, 1 zone 2 for the average person, just get them both in there, build your capacity in each, get uncomfortable in a couple different settings, and keep running with it from there. But if you guys do have any wearables, some things you can track as far as key metrics, and then like if you do switch it, or maybe you start with just HIIT or just zone 2, and then you do some type of hybrid, see what improved these metrics the best as you go throughout this over the next year. And again, it's not going to be immediate, so give it time and apply these for a specific period of time. But your resting heart rate should gradually decrease. Keep an eye on your HRV, that heart rate variability, where that's trending. VO2 max is a little tough unless you're going in to actually get this done, but I think, you know, Garmin and Whoop might give you a general estimation of this.
Or it does too.
Or the VO2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
I know they
They
give
do
you
an
like your
estimated VO
cardiovascular age.
They do an estimated VO2 max, and you can also do their, like, I want to say it's like a 6-minute walk test to
right.
Walk
help
test,
get
yep.
more accurate with the VO2 max prediction. So if you're someone who's like not training HIIT at all and you are listening to this and you're like, I'm going to go run some sprints, could be kind of cool on Aura. If you use Aura, or Whoop or Garmin might have something similar, but like do the walk test and get kind of like a baseline VO2. And then start trying this out. Do a few HIIT sessions per week, retest in a few months, maybe give it 6 to 12 weeks minimum. And then retest and see if you notice a difference in your VO2. Again, probably not going to be, definitely not going to be as accurate as actually going in and like doing a VO2 max test with a metabolic cart, which is absolutely miserable, but you could probably find one if you wanted to.
Go to a local university. They'll probably want to use you as a guinea pig for their students, and it will be free.
It is so miserable.
Yeah, it sucks really bad. Just
Luck if you do
FYI.
that. Yeah. But anyway, it would be
I was
cool
gonna say,
to hold a baseline and then compare.
I agree. If you're a data person, that's super cool. And on Aura too, something that I do find is pretty accurate is like they'll say how many years like younger you are based on your cardiovascular health, I think it is. And mine used to be like at peak running, like last summer when I was running 30 miles per week, it was 11 years younger. And throughout pregnancy, it slowly declined because I'm just obviously doing less. And it was really sad to see, but now I'm at like 6 years younger, so I'm building back up. But that's another cool metric to kind of like just gauge where you're at cardio wise. I think it's just interesting, but
I only see that sometimes in mine. I never know where it actually is. It like pops up.
It's in like by resilience or whatever. I think it's under that.
No, it's under your health. Health.
Which is under resilience. The resilience like shows up top. Like
your cardiovascular age, and then it will tell you what capacity.
Mine is 5 years younger.
Yeah, I'm at 6.
And my resilience to stress is strong, which is hilarious.
My resting heart rate. My resting heart rate was 39 this morning.
I saw that. You need to be checked. You need to be studied.
That's insane.
That's insane.
My mom's is always low too, but like I haven't regularly seen 30s. Although I know, thinking postpartum, I still likely have some more blood volume circulating. No.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's playing a role.
I remember seeing do you remember seeing in your Aura data, like right when you had your babies, the massive like shift in your heart rates and stuff? I remember
resting
I went
heart rate
from,
and HRV.
Yes. Like I remember literally Reese's heart rate, like by the end of that pregnancy, I was like probably like resting heart rate, like 72. And then I had her and literally the next day it was like 48. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, like, it's wild.
It's wild. It's wild. Anyway.
Yeah.
We love data.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Josh, where can they find you?
We're not there yet. We got to ask them.
Okay,
You weren't on. I was too nice last week. I went a little too soft. Last Monday, I believe.
I don't remember what you said.
It was a 3-episode request. I switched it to. We're going to go back to the rule. It's going to be a rule. If you're listening beyond 3 episodes, guys, we just ask that you leave a quick 5-star review, share us on social media, tag us. We love to start that conversation. And again, this is a reminder, you guys are the fitness league. We're just 3 assholes with a microphone, as Joelle likes to say. But this is for you guys. And by sharing,
said idiots, not assholes, for the record.
No, there was some potty mouth involved the first time, I believe. Maybe it was 3 idiots with a mic. But the point is to help grow the fitness league, which is you guys, the audience. If you got value, someone else probably will too, and it just helps us within the algorithm if you leave that 5-star review. Obviously, when you share it on social media, somebody can find the episode. But we have the health coaching company. We've got the app. But this is a free resource we provide for those who can't or are not currently able to, for any capacity, work with us. We refer them over here. The free resources on the site. We're just doing our part. We're showing up twice a week for you guys. If you're showing up and listening, just pay it forward. That's all.
Leave a fucking review.
There she goes with that mouth. I'm calling Brant as soon as we get off of this.
Josh is going to text Brant. Your wife was cursing all over the podcast today. Sorry. Sometimes I just get real passionate.
She just gets excited about this topic.
HIIT is one of her passions.
It is. I would say it's the Italian in me, but I'm really not Italian at all. So just fine. It's the New Yorker in me. That one word.
That is fitting. That is fitting.
I'm
It's
only
funny.
Italian by marriage.
Anyone who has a fraction of Italian blood will always blame their temper on that. Got the fire blood.
Yeah, I just got the New York blood. It was funny well, I'll tell you this off camera. Goodbye, everybody.
Where can they find you?
Before Joelle goes on another rant. Never mind.
They probably want to hear it. I'm at Alessandra Skutnik.
At Joelle Samantha.
I'm at Josh Skutnik.
See you next week.
Everything else is in the show notes.
Everything else you need.